It's the Sunny Symphony Podcast. It's the Sunny Symphony Podcast. Talking sure is great when it's with a good mate. Oh, Sunny Symphony Podcast.
Oh, hello.
Hello.
Can you believe we're at episode 3, Pie?
Oh, it feels like just yesterday we were conspiring about starting this podcast.
I know. I'm so excited. But it's funny, like, I have an excitement, and then there's, like, that nervous excitement, because you already know, like, now you know it's really not a fluke.
Yeah, I know. We made it this far.
I know. So, I mean, it's just... I'm excited to be here, and I'm so excited for this episode. For those of you who are first-time listeners, viewers, I am Sassy. My pronouns are she, her.
I'm SunPy, and my pronouns are they, them.
And you are listening to the Sunny Symphony Podcast, Pride Edition. Woo woo! Just remember, one, Pi and I are not licensed professionals. We're just two beings talking about mental health and life. Pi, I know that today is going to be a very special episode for you because you get to share about your journey. But it is special for those of you who are part of the LGBTQIA plus community. For this week's episode and next week's episode, we are doing Pride-themed episodes, and I'm super excited about that. Pi, I know that we had talked about just, sharing a little bit about, what Pride means, and just sharing a little bit about, just the background and the history of it. And I wanted, for you to be able to share a little bit about that and just kind of be able to, because, like I told you before, like, there are a lot of people who genuinely don't know the history of why we have Pride Month.
Yeah, I actually didn't know the history myself until very recently. And if you're watching and not just listening, I have my phone right here. I have some cheats in front of me. Big hacker being me. But
Technology!
Right, technology is so useful. Might as well use it. But this is an article on them, and I thought I would read a little bit because last time, just so everybody knows, this is the second time we're recording this episode because the first time
it's our encore episode.
It is. Well, we lost the first time we recorded it, so we're spicing it up this time, and I actually have some information on how Pride was started, why Pride is so important and significant. Sylvia Rivera should be recognized as one of the main people that started Pride. And if you didn't know, Pride did start as a riot. We were fighting for our rights. I mean, I wasn't there. It happened in June 1969. So
Slightly before our lifetime.
Yeah, I wasn't exactly around, but it's called the Stonewall Riot. And Sylvia Rivera, actually, she is known to have thrown the first cocktail, the Molotov cocktail, but she actually says, I threw the second one. I didn't throw the first one. So she threw the second one at the riot. But she is so important because she is not only one of the, she was an activist. She was a transgender activist, but she fought so hard for our rights, especially during the riot, and she sought to create safe spaces for queer, homeless youth, spoke loudly and powerfully that her community of transgender individuals, and this, I will also say, for people that don't know, transgender people back in the 1960s couldn't just live and exist outside. Their lives were physically in danger, and to be exposed was either you were going to be homeless or you were going to be put in jail and beat. So,
oh wow,
she was so brave and fearless to be able to do this. It was not a good time. But because of queer people back then, because they fought, because they rioted, and they wanted to see a change, we are allowed, we being transgender or anybody on the LGBTQIA plus spectrum, we're allowed to actively be ourselves out in the open because these people physically fought for us. And
That's amazing. Yeah.
it really is so amazing. I did want to note though, because originally Sylvia Riviera was well, she considered herself a drag queen at first. And well, I find that interesting because then later on she said, "No, I'm transgender." And I think that might be a common occurrence back then. Like, no, I'm just dressing up as
Yeah.
a girl. Like, I'm not actually a girl. But I think it was more of a safety kind of thing. Um,
Sure.
of course, unfortunately, Sylvia Riviera passed away, I believe, in 2002. I don't have the date exactly, and it's not in this article that I'm reading off of. But she is resting in peace. But I just, it's important to note the people that came before us and actually fought for our rights as transgender individuals like myself, but also everyone else. 2002, I was correct. Ha 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 ha. Thank you for making sure. But
Yeah, and I think that's something that's so important to know, you know, and
yes.
I
And
think that for oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, I just wanted to know because she was born in the Bronx to a Venezuelan mother and a Puerto Rican father. So
Oh.
she was a mixed baby, but she was a person of color. So I feel like that is important to note.
Oh yeah, no, that's even more like because even back then, I mean, you know, because my parents are older,
Mm-hmm.
but people of color, not, not, I mean, of all races, really, with people of color, back in the 60s, there was still a lot of injustice.
Yeah.
So even more so, but with saying that, you are right. Like it's so important for us to know, um, just why we celebrate Pride, and with that,
Mm-hmm.
we do dedicate this episode and our next episode not only to Sylvia, but to those who paved the way so that people from the LGBTQIA plus community could have more rights than what we've had in the past. And I think that that's something. And honestly, I still feel like we are such a long way,
I
you
agree.
know,
Yeah.
to go. Um, but just the fact that there are there's so many more freedoms today that weren't even thought of back then.
Yeah. And I agree. There's stuff that we can work on. But I think what's great is that we're talking about it, we're bringing the conversation, and we're educating people. So I have a question since we've gone over that.
Sure.
What was your first experience with someone from the LGBTQIA community?
Ooh. So I was like, wow, hot seat real fast.
You're on.
We're like, no,
Spotlight.
we're like, no, your story, not mine. No, it's funny. You and I talked about this
Hmm.
before. Um, for me, I grew up in a smaller town in Texas. And so with that, we had a lot of people who actually came out later on in life after high school, because the city that I lived in wasn't exactly completely diverse, which most Texas towns, small towns at least, were like that. Also, in case you guys didn't know, viewers and listeners, I am slightly older than Pi.
A little bit, just a
So it
little.
was a different time back then.
Yeah.
But my first time, um my first experience with someone from the LGBTQ community actually came as an adult.
Mhm.
So we I had two neighbors. Their names were Ryan and Zach, who they lovingly always said, "Hey, we're your new gabers," and I'm like, "Oh, fun!" And
Gabers.
so yeah, they were so great. They're from Ohio and had just moved to Texas, and I was one of the first people that they had met at the complex. And I was walking my dogs. They were both dog people, and they were just like, "Hey, you seem really cool. Let's hang out sometime." I'm like, "Sure." So thus began a beautiful friendship that started off by our swimming pool and turned into an amazing friendship even till today. But before then, I really hadn't met. I hadn't met really anyone who was gay that I would say like, "Oh yeah, I really know them," And with Ryan and Zach, one of the things that I remember is, I think we both grew as people, because I got to learn more about what it was to be part of the gay community. They came from a small city in Ohio. It wasn't like Cincinnati, where it was a little bit bigger and one of the things with that is that there was, they kind of came with the chip on their shoulder, feeling like, if you didn't, know about, what it was to be gay, you just didn't agree. And it was like, hey, it was me explaining to them, like, sometimes it's just pure ignorance. Like, and the more they got to know me, the more they realized that sometimes you just come from a place of not knowing.
Right.
And the more you educate yourself and the more you learn, the more your eyes are opened. And so for them, I think that they learned as much about knowing that not every person who doesn't know is an enemy, just as much as I learned, what it was to be part of the LGBTQ community. And so, oddly enough, they got married back in 2016 when it still wasn't legal to get married in Texas. It still wasn't legal to have same-sex marriages. So they went to Ohio and, and again, they had to go to Cincinnati. They couldn't really go to their hometown because it just wasn't very accepted. So they went to, Cincinnati to get married. And I just remember like it was so crazy because the year after is when same-sex marriages became legal in Texas.
Wow.
And so, yeah, so I mean, like, I got to witness something like that because before I wouldn't have even thought about it, like the importance of it until I had to see my friends travel like thousands of miles to go get married because they couldn't,
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's really interesting, and you and I have talked about this, because I do consider myself an ally, but I've also made it very clear to Pi, because we've talked about, like when you came out, and I struggle sometimes with pronouns, and I will always tell them, I'm like, I'm so sorry, and I sit there, but also it was one of those things where like I didn't even realize how big pronouns were a thing until recently, and I learned how important it was to just educate yourself rather than just go, okay, well, I messed up, whatever, or things like that. I mean, and that is something that as you and I talk here, as you share your story, I will tell you guys, especially with an episode like today, I want you guys, if anything that y'all can take away from this is going to be not only how important it is to share your story if you're part of, the LGBTQ community, but on the other side, when you are not part of it, if anything, I hope that this just opens your eyes and your hearts a little bit. And if you are an ally, it is definitely more than just retweeting and sharing a post. It is a lot about educating yourself. And even, as you share your story, when you and I talked about this beforehand, there were so many questions I asked Pi, and I was like, I'm so sorry I'm asking you this, and I know it's getting personal, but I'm like, I'm coming again from a place of ignorance, and you and I had a really honest conversation that night, and I think that, for as much as you and I talk and as much as we're friends, I think being able to have that conversation was something that was so vital.
Yeah.
So without further ado, Pi,
yes,
my dear friend, co-host of the Sunny Symphony Podcast, is about to share with you their journey on their story of coming out. And obviously, like every story, it has a beginning.
Yeah, yes, it does.
It always starts somewhere. So let's start from the beginning.
Oh, the beginning. Oh, the beginning. So I do want to say I came from a religious family. I was baptized as a wee baby Catholic. My grandma, got them to pour the holy water over my head or whatever I don't know. I haven't seen baptism in so long. But it's worth noting because the religious aspect is what held me back from coming out for so long. And initially is what it's what stopped me and more or less implemented fear for me to make my way out of the closet. But the first time I remember having, I would say, body dysmorphia, if I'm using that term correctly, was when I was in elementary school. And we had been talking about periods and our bodies and what a tampon is. And my teacher at the time, I think I was in like fifth or fourth grade, and she just said, "Yeah, go explore yourself. Yeah, just stick a mirror down there, give a look at your hoo-ha, just examine it, see what it looks like, because it's gonna change." And I said, "No, thank you." I said, that sounds awful. I don't want to look at that. That doesn't sound like a good time to me. That sounds very icky, and that makes me uncomfortable.
How times have changed.
I know, right? But because of school and them saying, explore yourself and get to know your body because it's going to change and you're going to go through these changes. Well, they didn't exactly tell me what changes I was going to go through. And so I was looking at myself in the mirror and I was just thinking in my little, elementary school kid brain and saying, I don't think I'm a girl. I don't think I'm a girl. And not really knowing how bodies exactly work. I told myself, and I just remember getting so fed up, and I was walking to my room through the hallway, leaving the bathroom, and I was like, you know what? I'm probably just gonna grow a penis. It'll come. It'll just grow. And because I'm a boy, and that's probably how this works. And so I'll just wait to see what happens because I don't feel like a girl, and I don't want to look down there. And so I'm probably a boy. So needless to say, that's not how bodies work. So
big surprise.
I know. But I mean, when you're a kid, you just you make up something to make things make sense for yourself, or you just kind of take a guess. And I was kind of taking 2 spoons from each of those.
For sure.
But I didn't take any action on that as a child. Honestly, I was like, oh, I'm going to dress more like a boy. You know what that meant to me as an elementary school kid? It meant wearing black more. It meant wearing darker clothes. And so I'd be shopping with my grandma. Well, I mean, I would go shopping and I was like, oh, I don't want the frilly, colory stuff, Grandma. Grandma, I don't want the frilly stuff. Give me the dark clothes. And listen, I could go differently. I know. My grandma said I was just being emo. She's like, why are you being emo? And I was like, no, I didn't tell her I was trying to be a boy. But
you're like, okay.
Yeah. I was like, I don't understand what that means, Grandma, but
I was like, I'm an emo boy.
But I mean, I don't think I was technically either of those things, but as a kid, you're just like, you're trying to make things make sense for your brain. And
sure.
So, speed forward, I will say I didn't think anything of it after that. I was like, yeah, okay, going through middle school, I think I had like these phases, and we talked about this last time. Middle school for America differs state to state,
Mm-hmm.
which makes it extra confusing. But
For real.
middle school is a confusing time regardless, because I think we said you're about like 11, no, like 10. How? Like it's
No,
like,
we said it was like 11 to like 14 depending, because like it was like 11. Well, it was like, no, it was like 11 to like 13.
okay, so but your teenage years, it's like beginning your teenage years. So, the hormones are starting and you're like feeling adventurous and you want a boyfriend or whatever, girlfriend, friend, friendly
Yeah.
friend. And there's nothing significant about my middle school like feeling like that, besides like I was very, during middle school, I was so Christian. We went to church almost every weekend. I was so devoted. I wanted to go to youth group on Wednesdays and go to Sunday school on Sundays. And that's where my mind was at. And I was absolutely not allowed to think like about having a same sex partner, because I just didn't allow myself to think about it. Now, high school came around, and I feel like I was feeling a little rebellious. And while I was still devoted to Christianity, I was also I wanted to I wanted to explore. Like I wanted to think about like, well, what if I wanted to be with a girl? Like I knew, um,
Yeah.
like I was the first graduating class, which also means that my freshman year of high school, it was just my class on my school campus. There was no upperclassmen. I was the upperclassman all 4
Wow.
years. Yeah, so we really created the atmosphere and the community at my high school.
And
And
see, that's so not the norm.
right. Yeah, and
'Cause, like we talked about this, you got to have a smaller class
mhm.
where you have places where like, you and I talked about high school. Like in my class, our graduating class was almost 500 people.
Mhm. And
And
my graduating class was 80.
yeah, and it's so crazy. And I think that this is definitely for this is definitely for an episode for another day. But I have said this to you, a couple of times, and I really hope that if you're a parent and you're listening,
Mhm.
or if you're not a parent but you have teenagers in your life, because we all know them and we all love them, but I really wish that as adults we would validate the feelings that teenagers go through, because I will tell you
Absolutely.
that they are experiencing emotions
Mhm.
that they've never experienced until they get to high school, when there's a bit more freedom and there's so many other things that they're exposed to,
Oh
and they're
yeah.
experiencing all of these emotions. And then, like you said earlier, bodies are changing, and you have
Mhm.
hormones and all of these things. And it's like, I think about the stuff we go through as adults, and I'm just like, hell, if that's hard for us as an adult to process, imagine being a teenager having to process all of these thoughts and these emotions for the first time.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
it's incredible to me. So as you got into high school, obviously you got lucky, you had a smaller class, and like you said, you were able to kind of build this environment. But let's
Yeah.
talk about you specifically. So for Pi,
Yes.
what was going through their mind going into those older teenage years, where you're really starting to like just learn a little bit more about your identity and learning more about yourself?
So, in my later years of high school, I it's not that I fell out with my religion. It was that I thought, well, if I'm feeling this way, I should explore and honor these feelings and see what works for me while still
Mhm.
having my faith and like still holding on to my faith. Um, and I came back to that idea, that not idea, that like inkling, that pull that I had when I was a kid that like I'm just not in the right body. Like this body is not for me.
Mhm.
And I had a conversation with a acquaintance who I knew people who were transgender and had some experience with that. And I was in the mindset that I was like, I'm a boy. I'm a boy and I want to explore how that would feel because I'm not a female, so I must be a boy. I will say I knew a little bit about they them and what being an NB was, but it was
Yeah.
a lot less prevalent. And this was around the time of Tumblr. Hi, is that like saying my age? But it's fine. Um, but
Trust me, I'm not gonna go through the things that would make you give away my age, so we're good.
but well, okay, so Tumblr around my time was filled with gays, furries, fandoms, but most importantly, because of Tumblr, I was able to explore myself a little more. And so
Sure.
it's important to note because if I would not have been on Tumblr, if the resources would not have been there, I wouldn't have taken that step to say, I don't think I'm a girl. And so I bought some clothes. This was about the same time that I started working. So I had my first job, and so I had some money, and I was like, I don't know what it means to be a boy. So I messaged this acquaintance, and I was like, hey, what do I do? Please help me. Like, what are my steps here? And they were super nice. They were kind, but I feel like I hit a wall kind of, and I didn't know how to what clothes were boy clothes. So I kind of like I got like a button up and like some slacks, and I got like this tank top and was just like, yes, these are my boy clothes. And
Yeah.
as a high schooler, I feel like I wasn't fully educated on like gender specifically. And I wasn't allowing myself to explore my sexuality. Is
Sure.
and I think that is worth noting that I was not allowing myself. I was like, I could be attracted to girls, but it's I'm just not. I'm just not. We're gonna
Yeah.
be straight. Um, so I had these clothes and I'd wear them in my room, and then they would disappear and we would never see them again. They
So
would just sit
now
there.
I do have to ask this
Yes.
because you talked about, how you bought clothes
Mm-hmm.
and you would wear them.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that you said, "Oh, I come from like a devout religious Catholic family." What was going on? Like, how is it that you kept your parents from seeing this?
Um, I started driving when I was 17, which I think
Hmm.
was my sophomore year. Um, and so I would take myself places. Um, I would drive myself and pick up clothes, and my parents weren't really around at home. My mom worked really late, and she worked really late all the
Same.
time. And my dad was either there or he was gone doing business. But if he was home, like he usually didn't talk to me, he'd sit in his living room and watch TV. So they, there was no way that they would have known because they didn't pry. They kind of lived in their own little world, their own little bubble, if you would.
Yeah. So, okay, so with that, now, we've gone through teenage pie.
Right. Yes.
And then comes the real world. Because, after high school, it's when they always say, like, oh, you find out who you are when you're in the real world and you're in college and all of that fun stuff. So
Yeah.
I want to know at that point, because I know that, at that age, when we get to that point, we're really, I won't say we're struggling, but you're never fully prepared. Like you're really trying to figure out who you are.
Yes.
And, and so with that, what was life after high school like?
I went to college, so I had the fantastic opportunity to enroll in a 4-year. And my first 2 years of college, I was I was like, it's so hard to say because there's nothing wrong with religion, but for me, it was like this big stop sign. It was like this big boulder that was painted red that was like you cannot get past. And I spent the first two
Yeah.
years striving to find a church and a community of people that would love me. And I never really found a community or people or a church. And I found queer friends and I found some friends who believed differently, and I took some classes on religion. And
Mhm.
eventually I said, okay, I'm not going to be Christian anymore. And once I gave that to myself, I really like broke open and allowed myself to explore who I was without thinking that like there was something like I was doing something wrong. Um,
Yeah.
and I do want to say for anybody listening, because I know there are some gays that are Christian, and that's totally valid. But for me, when I was going through that journey, I was very ignorant. I was, just experiencing life and trying to make sense of what was going on in my brain and with my body. And so you're totally valid if you to be gay and also be Christian. But for me, I I just I needed to step away from that and allow myself to figure out attraction. And I started thinking, oh, maybe I'd like a girlfriend. Maybe I'd like a girlfriend. So the
Yeah.
last 2 years of college, I
Mhm.
spent exploring that a little and like thinking about it and just like, oh, maybe I'll just think about it. Um, I know it. And the thing about sexuality and oh, sexuality and gender is they really come hand in hand because if you decide like, oh, maybe I'm attracted to the opposite sex, and so
Mhm.
that changes your sexuality. But then when you start thinking about it, like you meet transgender people or you meet non-binary people, which are also transgender because they fall under the transgender umbrella. But you start thinking, oh, well, am I really comfortable in this flesh prison? Like, do I
Yeah.
feel aligned with what it means to be a woman? And I inevitably, my last year of college was just like, no, I don't feel comfortable in this body. I don't feel the label of woman doesn't fit me. And I'm not straight. Don't like I'm like it's interesting thinking back then because I didn't know and I didn't know what was gonna happen, but if I wouldn't have thought that way, I wouldn't have met Max. I wouldn't be on the path that I'm on now.
Yeah.
But I would
And
say,
it's amazing how things just unfold when you choose to follow your real self and you choose to find that person, you know?
yeah. And
I think that's amazing.
it's it's like opening a door that you had locked and bolted shut and finally getting to peek behind it and finally getting to explore what's beyond that door. Because I would say for years, I was just looking at that door and like putting more locks on it and going, I'm never going to open that door because I can't. And I finally took all the locks off and, hello. um, but because of that, I would say, I think we said 2019. I think
Mhm.
December
Yes.
2019, I was still in college and I decided, okay, I'm going to come out as gay to my family because at the time I was dead set on I like girls. I like girls because I don't like boys. I must like girls. It was again like how before when I was younger, how I was like, oh, I'm not a girl. I must be a guy. It was one of those situations.
Yeah.
Um, so I came out to some of my friends and was like, yeah, I like girls and I go by they them and tested it out. They were like, yeah, whatever. they were supportive, but it was like that kind of energy. They were just kind of like, yeah, okay. And it wasn't like, yeah, that's awesome. It was like a, okay. Um, ugh. So then, December 2019, I decided to come out to my family as gay. It was too much to come out all at once. So I
Yeah.
kind of put my foot in the door and said, hello, family.
So how did that go? Like, because I mean, that's a big thing, and especially coming out to your family,
Yeah.
and as you said, again, devout Christian Catholic home, where it's one of those things where it's like you don't know how that's gonna go, so
Yeah.
like I'm really curious, like how did that go?
I I made the mistake of coming out to my mom first. And so here's how that went. I'll do a little reenactment. I said, Mom, let's go out to dinner. This is a thing that we would do a lot because my dad, like I
Mhm.
said, would be out of town a lot. So we'd go out to dinner and I met her. I think we drove separate cars and I met her at this restaurant that we used to go to all the time. And we're ordering the menus. I'm feeling anxious. Or what? No, no, no. We're ordering dinner. We're looking at the menus and we order our food. The waiter walks away and we're kind of just sitting there. And I'm like, all right, well, I just have to say it. So I said, Mom, I'm gay. And she said, what? And I said, I like girls. And she was just shocked. Like I said like some horrible thing. And she just was not happy. And I looked at her and, well, because I should say, I said, Mom, I have to tell you something. And I think when you say those
Yeah,
words to a parent, they're
that could
like,
be anything.
yes. And so I do think I set her, like, I shocked her a little bit.
Yeah.
But I was shocked with her response. And so I said, well, would you have rathered me be pregnant? And she looks me in the eye and she said, yeah, actually, I would have rathered that. And so I was like, well, um, I'm
That's
not.
crazy.
It's very typical of my mother. My mother loves
No,
me,
yeah, I mean,
but
I get it, but that's just like,
I know.
it's just mind-boggling.
And so after that, I was like, okay, it could have gone worse.
For
But
sure.
I was so afraid to come out to anybody after that. And
Well, yeah.
she was the first person I told in my family. And so then she was like, well, does your father know? And I was like, no, you're the first person I told, Mom. Like, I trusted you enough
Thanks,
to
Mom.
I know. And she got mad. She was like, well, I can't keep this secret from your father. I have to tell him right now. I'm like, you're gonna tell him literally right now? I'm like, you can't just wait for me to tell him. She's like, well, you better do it soon. You have to do it. You have to do it soon. You have to do it as soon as you can. And I was just like, okay. Uh,
Golly, I mean, that's even like that's so hard. Instead of you being able to come out when you're comfortable enough to do so, it's just like, nope.
yeah, like do it now. And
Yeah.
I will say though, it took me a couple weeks because my dad was out of town
Mm.
a lot, to actually work up the courage when he was home to like waddle over to his living room and like sit there awkwardly and be like, Dad, I gotta talk to you and tell you something. But the reaction was completely different. My father, we lost my brother in 2008. So my dad has this perspective of,
Yeah.
I'm gonna love you unconditionally as you are because you're my kid and I've lost a kid and I'm not gonna lose another one. Um,
Of course, yeah.
and
Which is understandable,
yeah, I will also say my mom didn't have that really same mindset because it technically wasn't her kid. It was technically like her step kid.
Yeah.
Um, but my dad was just like, okay, you like who you like. That's great. That's cool.
You're like, thanks, I think.
I don't remember the exact conversation, but basically he was just like, yeah, all right. Like, thumbs up. A total dad response, in my opinion.
For sure.
Oh, but so I got the
I love
parents
that.
out of the way. Oh, I know my dad's just been the backbone of whenever I came out. Because it came out. I've come out twice now.
Yeah.
So then I was tasked with telling my siblings, and
Oh,
my brothers they're 10 years older than me. They're 10 or 11 years older than me.
slight age difference.
Yeah, a little bit. But I remember the day because we went to go see the a light show kind of thing, or like a light display, and we were just about to go walk around and look at the lights. And we're sitting in like the food court area, and we're all gathered around. And I'm like, all right, it's now or never. It's now or never. I gotta do something. And I was like,
You're like, okay.
yeah.
Read the room. Read the room.
And I was like, I gotta let you guys know that I like girls. And my brothers, well, one of them was just like, all right, cool, whatever, let's go look at the lights. And the other one made a joke about it and said, well, you just haven't had the right dick that you like. And I was like, okay, but okay, I see you. They're jokesters. They're jokesters.
Typical brother response though. Like, had to make a really smart ass comment, right?
Yes. But they were cool. They were just like,
Yeah,
whatever, do whatever. And I was like, yes, I'm out. I can be gay in public and like people, and it's all good. And I had to,
yeah.
I think I wrote a letter to my grandma, or I had to tell my grandma, and my grandma was cool with it too. She was just like, yeah, whatever. My grandma's always been, my grandma's the Catholic one too. And so that's why I was confused, because usually Catholics are strict. And
Yeah.
so it threw me a little back. Threw me a little back with my grandma being
But
so accepting.
I mean, what a great way though, the fact that it was,
Oh yeah.
that she was so accepting. So at this point then, you came out to your family, so now,
Yes.
now you are open to love who you want.
Exactly.
And, yeah. And so life is grand, life goes great. Now, I know that shortly after this,
Mm-hmm.
just like every great love story, there's a beginning. And
Yeah.
I feel like for those of you who are listening and watching, Pie's partner, Max, incredible person. Like, I think we've said this in our prior episodes. We're very lucky for the partners that we have.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel that he played a very big part in these, into who you are now and who you are today.
Absolutely.
And in the rest of your journey. So I feel like it's so important that you share the story of like how you met Max and how he played that role.
I'm like giggling because
I love that though. I wish if y'all were not just listening, y'all were watching. I wish you guys would see anytime like we talk about our partners, like y'all, I've been married 4.5 years, and so I'm not that kind. Like, I'll get giddy, but I'm not like that. But I love seeing Pie's face anytime they talk about Max. I'm just like, oh.
Oh, well, our love story, the way it began is a little silly. Oh, okay, so 2019, December, right? I started going on TikTok, and this was before the panorama. This was before the Pan Demi Lovato hit. Okay, so TikTok hype was not a thing. Okay, so I'm just saying that, not to be a hipster.
So you did it before it was cool.
I'm not a hipster, but I did. Okay, I did it before it was trendy.
Hey, we're like this. You literally did it before it was cool.
I did.
Not in the hipster kind of way. You actually did.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That makes me feel so much better. I'm not a hipster, but moving forward. Um, so I was making these videos and like getting acquainted with TikToks, and then I came out and was like, awesome, I can find the gays on TikTok. And I found the gays on TikTok, and it was fantastic. So exciting. And what is it, in April or May or March? No. It was I think March, or no, beginning of April, because I made a video as a slight thirst trap, and it was like the biggest video that I had, like, that blew up for me, and it was like had like I think 1,000 or so views, which was a big thing to me. I was getting lots of comments.
You TikTok, we're like, you went TikTok famous. Hello.
And I was like, this is great. I'm getting attention from a bunch of females, and I knew at the time that I wasn't exactly looking for a female partner, but it is what was easiest to like say. And
sure.
So I make this thirst trappy video, and somebody comments, well, I'm not really a girl, but I think you're cute, or something like that. I can't remember the exact wording, but I was like, okay, I see you. And I was like, I'm interested. So I clicked on the comment, looked at the profile, and watched some videos, and was like, wow, they're cute. Yes, I'm not a girl, but I'm in between. Does that count? Is what the comment said.
I love that. I love that Max remembers what he said.
I think I was so flustered and like excited that I was just like, yes, I don't care, let's do this. I was like, yes, I found my bean. I slid in those DMs so fast. It was me. I did it.
You went.
I did, like, in. Yeah. I that was not the correct way. There we go. But I did. I slid in those DMs and was like, hey, how you doing? Like, what's going on? And yes, he pooped his pants. At the time, he was identifying as non-binary because that's what he was comfortable with. And I was also identifying as non-binary, like not in public, but like, in closed spaces, safe spaces, I would say.
Sure.
And we started this relationship on those like terms, and we just created together this little safe space to be each other and to explore who we are as we are. And it was on April 12th that we first talked, but I don't think that April 12th was the day that I published the video, because, TikTok algorithms, it could take a couple days. I think it was, not that it matters, but just to put dates out there. April 12th, 2020.
I love that so much.
It's an interesting love story.
Yeah.
Because we did start on TikTok, but we started talking and we couldn't stop talking. And then we met each other in May of 2020. And we met each other during the pandemic. We moved in.
I think that's amazing, like, honestly.
Oh, I am corrected. The video was actually on April 12th because I have a partner who likes to be specific and exact, and he found it.
Hey, it's okay. If you ask Aaron, my husband, when we were married, I always answer, oh, it was like the weekend before Memorial Day. And if you ask him, he'll give you how many years, months, dates, days, and hours we've been together.
What?
Like, yeah. So I can relate.
I can't remember every single detail.
I can't either. No.
Blessed that we have partners to do it for us. Yay. so because we had this like relationship,
Yeah.
we really allowed ourselves to branch out and figure out who we are and just be safe as we are. We used the pronouns that we preferred in closed spaces. And I think he's going to have to correct me on this. I think we moved in together, or he moved into my parents' house with me in September of 2020.
That's awesome. But I mean, like, it gave you guys, like, y'all had such an amazing time for your relationship because you guys, like, I know it's really funny to kind of quote, like, the whole Rihanna, you found love in a hopeless place, but.
Yeah, no, but really.
But I mean, like, you really did because, like, the world shut down and you had this, this time where just everything seemed so bleak and so dark for people. And to find love in the midst of that, even more so, you guys moved in, together like that, that's a big step in itself.
Yeah.
But in the middle of a pandemic,
Right.
like, to me, that just, I don't know, like, that just adds a whole extra level of like, gosh, that's dedication. Like, I love that.
So we did start out long distance, and I've only ever had one long distance relationship before, and this relationship was just so worth like fighting for. It was so worth like I I say this because, and I'm very confident about this, and it's why I slid into the DMs, is I manifested this relationship to happen because I wanted to find my person. I knew as soon as I found my person, I'd be able to start my business or start doing my career and start exploring what I really want to do and who I really am.
Yeah.
So because of him, I was able to do that, which is exciting.
I
It's why we're
love that.
here.
It really is. Like, honestly, we're very lucky to have super supportive partners. And I don't get me wrong, I love my husband. And we've had a lot of people who have helped us so much with this podcast. But Max, honestly, is next level. Like, I consider Pi one of my best friends, but I also consider Max the same way. And that's aside from the friendship that we have, because Max has been one of the most supportive people of this podcast, and genuinely just I love him to death. Like, I'm very thankful that he is so supportive, not only of just, your career and stuff, but he was very helpful in helping us get this podcast set up. So it's like, it's incredible to see that,
Yeah.
So with that, I know that, you guys moved in together and you talked about, like, you decided, to use, your pronouns in a safe space. So what then led y'all to decide, like talk me through when y'all decided it was time to actually use them, use them outside of your safe space and to actually come out?
So I think for Max, it started at his work because when he first started working there, he said, my pronouns are they, them. I'd like to be called they, them. And I'm very thankful for Max's job and for where Max works because they've been so kind and supportive through this whole thing. And when he said, I want to change my pronouns to he, him, they were just like, okay, done. We'll change. We'll do the paperwork, or I mean, not that there's paperwork to do, but refill out
but
things.
that's awesome though.
Yeah. And they were super supportive, and they've been so supportive throughout this entire experience. But that safe space basically was his work and our room and like each other at the first. And so when we decided to like break out of that and to expand a little more, he decided to write some letters to his family. He decided it was time to come out. And so he wrote letters to his family and this was this year. So we had been living together for a little bit, and we actually just started packing to move. And so we were at my parents' house, and we were applying to places to move out. And he was writing these letters and getting ready, and we were getting ready to go to Oregon to for the last trip, because we had to go to Oregon a couple times throughout him living here because he had a hole in his tooth. So he had to get dental work done in Oregon. But it was a great excuse to, on the last trip there, to have that conversation with his family. So while we were in Oregon, he mailed out the letters, and he had that conversation with his mom, and with his parents. And I think that was in March of this year, March 2021. So March 7th. He knows all the dates. He's got the dates written in his brain.
I remember I do remember that I do remember that being around that time, just because during that time was kind of when I got to see Max a lot more. Like, for those of y'all who don't know, Pi and I are Twitch streamers in another aspect of our lives. We individually stream on Twitch, and I remember Max coming into a stream, and I remember the first time seeing that he had said, like, I'm Max, and I go at, I identify as he, him.
Mm-hmm.
And that was in another stream. So I remember when he came into mine, I was like, okay, I want to be mindful of this, and I was just like, it was the first time I really had to actually have an interaction with someone whose pronouns had changed.
Oh, okay.
And so I wanted to be so respectful of that. And I remember him coming into my stream and just trying to be mindful of just being like, hey, he said this, and, and just like, oh, this is Max, and, and trying to do that, just because it was like, I knew that it was a big deal for him, and I wanted to just kind of, be respectful of that. And that is something that I think, I do want to just pause and say, for those of y'all who are not in the LGBTQIA community, I'm speaking from a place of love when I say that pronouns are very important to someone's identity. That is part of who they are. And if you do get it wrong, go out of your way to correct yourself. Apologize. You would do the same thing if you messed up someone's name. You would do the same if you messed up someone's, like, date of birth, their age, whatever. So understand that pronouns are a very big part of your identity, and it's just so important that if you do mess up, just correct yourself and acknowledge that. I think that it means a whole lot more than what you'll ever think, or you'll ever know. But also, I think it would make such a difference in this world if we would take the time to acknowledge that and correct ourselves, because
absolutely,
I've said that before, like, I came from a place of ignorance, and I know that when you and I have talked about that, like, I had that happen in my stream one time, and I felt so bad when and I was like, oh my gosh, I was like, no, wait, and I was like, but I did want to at least, just kind of pause and acknowledge that, because Max was the first time I had ever had someone who had changed their pronouns, and that happened. So with that, Max then, comes out. How did that play a part for you?
So he came out, and I was then, while we were with his parents, I was like, okay, I guess I'll come out. This, because, he's coming out. I should come out too. And if you are still in the closet, and uh, you're listening, just know it's never that easy. You can never just say, all right, I guess now is the time. Sometimes it's just building yourself up and allowing yourself to have that confidence to move forward and be who you want to be.
Yeah.
So he came out, and I think I'm still not out to his family. Just because I'm like, I don't know how to say that. Do I like send a text? But so he came out to his family, and that was March 7th, and we come back home, and I was like, okay, we're moving into a new place. Um and I had one of my first streams here in the new place, and it was Trans Day of Visibility, and I thought to myself, what? There's no better day to come out to my community as who I am.
Yeah.
And I think we said last time it was March 31st.
It
So
was. Yes.
so I decided I would come out to the community that we have, the wonderful people, the wonderful friends that we have on Twitch. And
Amazing group of people. I think we're very lucky
so
for the
lucky.
community that we're part of.
Absolutely. But I felt safe enough, and we had moved out of my parents' house. So I came out and I said, this is who I am. I go by they them. And it was nerve-wracking but exciting and relieving. But as much as it was relieving, it was also stressful because I felt like I was keeping a secret from my family now, because I was out
Yeah.
to my online friends, but my family didn't know.
Well, I remember though, like honestly, I remember you were so nervous about coming
Mhm.
out, period,
Yeah.
to the stream, because I remember, you and I had talked the night before, and there was such a like, you could see the nervousness building, and I knew, like, for those of you who don't know, like I work during the day, when they're streaming, and I was just like, oh my gosh, like I have to be there. Like I was just like, because I knew like there were so many nerves going on, and I remember being able to witness that moment. Like honestly, and it's not because Pi is my friend. It is just being able to see somebody truly be their most authentic self. Like watching you come out was probably one of the most beautiful things I had ever witnessed, because you genuinely, like, you looked like a whole weight had been lifted off of your shoulder. Like the Pie before and after you came out were like two different people. It was just so amazing to just kind of see that freeness, for you to be able to just go, hey, like, this is who I am. I am here for you to see. These are my pronouns. This is my identity. And just, it was a complete 180, and
Yeah.
I know that you could tell, like, the nerves you had been feeling the night before, like, completely melted away, especially the fact that you knew you were in such a safe space, but just being able to actually officially kind of just see your community embrace you,
Yeah.
for who you are. And I think that for me, that was something that was just, oh my gosh, like it was one of the most incredible things I had ever witnessed. And I was so glad, I think that we were all so happy to be a part of that.
Yeah. Oh, it's just I can remember I was so anxious to even just like
Yeah.
say the words, and then they came out, and it felt like a huge weight was off, because I had this now safe virtual space and friends that accepted me and loved me exactly for who I was. So it
Yeah.
felt wonderful. It felt wonderful. Oh,
So then,
yes.
obviously, you came out to your online family. So then, obvious at that point, you knew, okay, I have to come out to my family again.
Yep. But I had learned.
Yeah. Now, tell me, moving forward from the first time you came out, what was it like? Like, was it different? What did it look like then?
I learned from Max that writing letters was a spiffy way of coming out, and probably an easier way. And I learned from my first experience that sometimes my words fail me and I can't say what I want to say. So I wrote a letter out for my parents, addressed it to both of them. And I was going to leave it at my parents' house. And Max and I were going to visit the dog. Our dogs at my parents' house. They're living with them right now. And we went to go visit them. And my dad wasn't supposed to be home. So we get there and my dad's home. And I have this letter. And we're like, shit. Like, do I just leave it? Do I say, hey, there's a letter, peace out, bye? Or do I have this like conversation?
Sure.
So what I decided to do, which, I learned from the first time coming out to my mom first, was a bad idea. So I handed him the letter and was like, hey, Dad, I have this letter for you to read, and I'd like you to read it. And I handed it to him and like stepped back, and he just looked at me. He's like, you want me to read it right now? And I was like, yes, please. So I sat there and I twiddled my thumbs, and he was reading it, and he was like making some faces, and he folds it up and he goes, okay, so Max is Max, and what's P for? Because on the back I had written that my name is Pie, and he read it as P4.
No. So you already know now that I'm gonna have to just start calling you P4. Right. What's up, P4? I'm gonna just like,
it's like a
P4.
It's like a game
P4
sign.
in the house.
What?
Give it up for P4.
Exactly. I waltzed in. You can't see
Oh
me.
gosh. I love that so much.
So I had to explain to him, no, it's pronounced pie. But you can call me, I was like, you can call me Alex. I was like, it's fine.
Yeah.
And he was cool. He was like, okay, you're gonna give this letter to your mom? You're gonna wait? And I was like, I'm just gonna leave it on the counter. We're leaving. Like, she can read it and call me if she needs to. So
that's so great.
My dad is so supportive, and I have to, it's such a weird position to be in, because it's like I have to be thankful for my brother, because without him I would not be able to be who I want to be. My dad could have been so angry, but because he had this loss, he was just like, doesn't matter who you are, you're my child, so you're my child. And
for sure,
it's a part of my story, and I just but so then I wrote a letter to my grandma, mailed it to her, and was just like, not gonna deal with it, there you go, Grandma. And I left the letter to my mom, and I texted my brothers, and my brother Daniel, he was just like, thank you for texting me. Having an awkward conversation in person would have been awful, and this is just so much better. Great. Good job. And my other brother was just like, he texted me back, cool.
That's so funny. I mean, but you learned your lesson the first time. That dinner's not the way to go.
No, right.
Okay, and just for those of you who are listening and watching, just because it did not work out for them does not mean that dinner's always a bad idea.
Right.
It's basically you will feel you know, the way you come out is going to be the way you come out, you know? And you know, with that does give me a question, you know, like
Yes.
it does pose a very important question. Looking back now, because here we are,
Right.
2021,
2020.
and
Baby.
you know, yeah, and you now have come out, and you know, I mean, the best way to ask this is, would you have done anything differently?
No. Comma. um,
I love how it's like, no, comma.
because if I wouldn't have come out the first time how I did, I wouldn't have learned that letters just work better for me. A nonverbal approach. But if anything, I would have come out sooner.
Yeah.
And I have my life coach to thank for pushing me. I think the anxiety of keeping the secret, because it felt like a secret was building up. And so from the time I came out to my online friends, March 31st, I came out like May to my family. So it was like almost 2 whole months of me and like still going and visiting my family and like tiptoeing around, and like they didn't know about Max and they didn't know 100% about me. So I would have come out sooner, but sometimes things happen as they're supposed to, and I fully believe that things happened just as they needed to. So I'm very grateful.
1,000%.
Yeah, I'm grateful for how things panned out. And I will say, I didn't have this update last time, but I called my grandma, or my grandma called me yesterday. And we had a conversation, but it was like nothing had changed. I was like, so you got my letter? And she was like, yeah, I got your letter. And she was like, yeah, you and she can't remember names. She's getting old. So she's calling.
My mom's the same way, so I totally get it. I get it so much.
But she's like M. Max is now M to my grandmother. She's like, you and M need to come over and have dinner with me.
M&P4.
Yeah, M&P4. That sounds like dynamite or something.
It sounds like an element.
Yeah.
MP4.
M&P4.
That's your couple name. MP4.
Canon for now, forever. Not for now. Right now, it's canon. Become canon. That's what I meant to say. But yeah. So my grandma, super. She doesn't care. My grandma's like, she loves me for me. And actually, so my grandma, when my cousin was younger, couldn't say my name, my birth name, and so he called me Colexis with a C or a K. And so my grandma picks up the phone and she says, my Colexis, I mean my flower. And the flower is another story, but she was trying so hard not to use my birth name, because in the letter I wrote like this is I prefer to be called Alex, and she's my grandma, so she's like, I'm just gonna try to figure out something that works for me and works for you. But I was like, Grandma,
yeah,
I was like, you don't have to call me Flower. You can call me Colexis, because that's like, it's a nickname, you know? It's like, it's not dead naming me. It's just you being my grandma. And so I had to tell her, like, that's okay. I'm not going to tell you about the flower thing yet. I'm not going to explain right now why she called me Flower. I'm just going to leave it there. Going to leave a cliffhanger for you.
That's too funny. Well, I will say I'm so excited that you got to share your story, and I'm so thankful, like genuinely, just for the fact that you're able to share this. Because for those of you who are listening and those of you who are watching, if you haven't come out, like, everyone has their time.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's something that definitely needs to be repeated. As Pi said earlier, they said, like, it's when you're comfortable, it's when you're ready.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's something that's so important. And again, as I said earlier, for those of you who are not part of the community, the most important thing that you can do to support the community is educate yourself. And I think, and I hope that by sharing, their story today, that you guys take away from that, learning a little bit more what it's like to be a non-binary person in the LGBTQIA plus community. And you got to learn a little bit more about the history of why we celebrate Pride and why it's so important that we do celebrate Pride,
Yeah.
But with that, I thank you so much, Pi, for sharing your story today and for letting us all just kind of take a peek behind the curtain. I'm so thankful for that.
Well, I'm thankful for you for because this was kind of your idea of me sharing my story. And I personally feel like it's so important that people who are queer, people who are trans, that we share our experiences and our stories, because it's like me experiencing and learning about the LGBTQIA community on Tumblr. It opens a brand new world for people to explore and allow themselves to be who they were born to be. So I want to thank you
Yeah.
for allowing me to have this space to say my story. And I want to thank everybody listening at home, live, not live. Just thank you for being supportive and being kind and just loving us as we are, because it means so much to be able to exist without fear.
Yes. So once again, I am Sassy.
And I'm SunPy.
So we do hope that you guys enjoy this episode. We hope that next week you guys will tune in. We are going to talk about what it is to be a streamer. As we've said, we're both Twitch streamers, and we've been very, very fortunate to be a part of this platform and being able to actually stream on this platform. And so we want to be able to continue to celebrate Pride by sharing what experiences people have had being part of the LGBTQ plus community as a Twitch streamer. So with that, we are so thankful that you guys have listened to us. We hope to see you next time, but don't forget,
have a little fun, catch a little sun, and we'll see you next time. Mwah.
bye.
Bye. It's the Sunny Symphony Podcast. It's the Sunny Symphony Podcast. Talking sure's great when it's with a good debate. Oh, Sunny Symphony